Upgrade, 2018 action film starring Logan Marshall Green, also known as Discount Tom Hardy because of the resemblance to the more famous actor. The story starts over fairly generic. It takes place in the not so distant future where automation and robots and robotics are becoming more and more prevalent, but not completely dominant yet. Logan Marshall Green plays Gray, a guy who is very grumpy about the futuristic stuff. He works as a car mechanic, revamping older American muscle cars for rich people, still getting his own hands dirty. And one of his clients is the owner of a massive robotic company, and on the way back from his house after delivering a car, Gray and his wife have a car accident. They are then jumped by a group of thugs, and the wife is shot dead, and Gray ends up alive but quadriplegic. He loses control over his body from the neck down. Culprits are never found, despite the police investigating. Several months later, Gray is approached by that owner of the robotics company with an offer. He can insert Gray with a state-of-the-art chip into his neck that will repair the broken nerve connections and make Gray whole again. The only condition is that he has to keep this thing a secret, as the chip is still in an experimental phase. As it turns out, though, the chip has a built-in AI called STEM, and that AI starts talking to Gray in his mind. Think of Iron Man and Jarvis, kind of similar. And then it also turns out that STEM has amazing capabilities that may help Gray find the people responsible for his wife's death. Now, okay, admittedly, this whole premise sounds incredibly dull and boring and like something done 100 times over. That's what I was thinking as well for about 20-25 minutes. But then the first action sequence happened and I immediately went, holy fuck. Because let's make it clear, the action in this film is absolutely phenomenal. It won't be too big of a spoiler to say that the premise of almost all action sequences is that Gray lets STEM take partial or full control over his body, and the machine essentially fights for him. And it's just so incredibly satisfying and entertaining to watch. Firstly, because of stunning choreography of the fights. Second, because of the way they're shot. The camera is often set up and moving in such a way that Gray always remains in center frame, which is just something I haven't seen before in a movie like this. Third, because the fights are absolutely brutal and there's no holding back ever. And finally, because Logan Marshall Green himself, who does a terrific job of acting like someone whose head is operated by someone else than the rest of his body at times. Because of the robotic nature of STEM, even outside of fights, he moves in this weird kind of robotic, tense or tight way, and he makes it very believable. Excellent physical performance. So, in my opinion, the action itself would be good enough to justify an otherwise weak film. But the thing is, it isn't really weak. After it gets through that 25 minutes of setup, it just gets progressively better and better. And that's both in terms of the story and the atmosphere. It goes from generic sci-fi to full-on cyberpunk. And not just the slow burn brand that was seen in Blade Runner, but rather something reminiscent of the Deus Ex video game series. Hacking, cybernetic implants in people's bodies, lethal weapons hidden in arms and eyes and faces, and the setting that gradually switches from Gray's boring house to derelict apartments, shitty alleyways filled with junkies, dive bars belonging to gangs, and all of that basked in the colorful neon lights. And then there's the ending, which, okay, one reveal is quite predictable, but then there's another which throws that away, and the actual ending itself is just so extremely satisfying because of how bold it is. It made me think of another recent sci-fi movie, but I won't tell which one because that in itself would spoil the entire thing instantly. One last thought that I had, couldn't shake, is that the movie was released the same year as Venom, starring Tom Hardy, where you also have a regular guy bonding with an external entity that can take over his body, that he can talk to, that he then uses to investigate conspiracies. And even the actors look the same. It really does look like a mirror version of Venom, but better in every single aspect, which to be honest is not something I expected to say before seeing the film. I was expecting a cookie cutter action movie that would maybe do one interesting thing, but instead I got a well thought out product that is fantastically executed on every front. Seriously, go and see it, it's amazing.